title, The Orchestrated Persecution of Nadezhda Shalub-Kevorkian. Now, they say that she's an Israeli Arab. Her last name is 100% Armenian. Shalub is definitely a Semitic last name, but Kevorkian is not. That is an Armenian last name, so she's an ethnic Armenian mixed with Lebanese or some kind of Semitic ethnicity. It doesn't really matter. But she's a professor in Israel, and she got arrested recently for going onto a podcast and saying Zionism should be abolished. That was why she got arrested. You could say, well, that's legitimate. Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. But it says here the orchestrated persecution of Nadezhda Shalub-Kevorkian, vicious campaign by Israeli academia, police, and media to silence the professor, shows Palestinians they have no safe place in Zionist institutions. And it's becoming more and more repressive. You could say, well, the Islamic world is repressive. Yes, but we're not talking about the Islamic world. We're talking about the country that is constantly touted as the only democracy in the Middle East. Okay, this is America's 51st state, and it's Israel. So let's talk about this. April 18th, Israeli police arrested Professor Nadezhda Shalub-Kevorkian, a renowned Palestinian scholar and my former academic supervisor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. They kept her detention overnight in conditions designed to break her spirit like other Palestinian political prisoners before a court ordered her release, rejecting the police's demand to extend her time behind bars. Now again, who runs the police in Israel? It's Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is a fanatic. That's who runs the police in Israel. He's a Jewish fanatic. The arrest and ensuing interrogations are the latest phase in the Israeli authorities' crusade against the professor, who is a vocal advocate of Palestinian rights and an outspoken critic of Zionism. Shalub-Kevorkian's incarceration was clearly intended to be as cruel and dehumanizing as possible. According to her family, police officers raided her house in the Old City of Jerusalem without warning, searching and confiscating her books, papers, notes, and interview transcripts. During her interrogation and detention, the officers subjected the 64-year-old to ill treatment and practices that amount to forms of torture. She was stripped, searched, yelled and cursed at, and thrown in a cold, isolated, and urine-smelling cell infested with cockroaches. The cell was kept illuminated throughout the night with bright, buzzing lights to prevent her from sleeping, and for some of the time her hands and feet were shackled. Shalub-Kevorkian requested to raise the temperatures of the cell or be provided with warm clothes were refused. And she had to use a damp sheet that also smelled of urine to shield from the cold. The authorities even used her health conditions as leverage, suffering from dangerously high blood pressure due to the arrest, and fearful of potentially having a stroke, she had to plead with the prison doctor and medics to provide her with medicine. The transcript of her court hearings the following day reveals the authorities' fervent determination to depict Shalub-Kevorkian's knowledge production as incitement. The hearings show that the arrest warrant and interrogation were instigated directly in response to her interview on the Makdisi Street podcast last month, particularly regarding her remarks calling to abolish Zionism. So she said, I think Zionism should be abolished. Now you could say, well, that's wrong. Okay, fine. But that the fact that you would get arrested for something like that shows you Israel is becoming more and more repressive. I don't care what anyone tells me. This is a fact. When the defense lawyers, my father told me, because I was talking to him about this stuff last night, and my dad told me when he was growing up, that's how it was. You said something, you got arrested, right? You said something that was critical of the government, you got arrested. That's how it was. But that's how it was for Palestinians living in the West Bank. So my father grew up in the West Bank when it was under military occupation. And under a military occupation, you got arrested for just saying a word that's critical of the government. That's how it was. But it wasn't like that necessarily for Israeli citizens. This woman is an Israeli citizen. The police representative also recited a quote that he claimed to have obtained. So the police are trying to nail this professor, trying to say that she's a terrorist or a terrorist agitator. And he presented this quote from this professor in which the professor said, "Every day in Jerusalem," so here it is, "every day in Jerusalem we see the army humiliating women and arresting young people. Young people are beaten and unable to breathe." All right. Again, there's nothing wrong with this statement. I mean, you could say that it's inaccurate or something, but this is not a criminal offense. When the judge asked what this quote had to do with the professor's case, the police claimed that her scholarship and influential status could brainwash hot-headed Muslims into conducting violent acts against Israel. Yeah, that's not an argument. I mean, I could easily say the same thing about the other side. I could say, well, Ben Gvir calling some woman a terrorist because her son was killed by an Israeli police officer and she got upset over that. I think that's also incitement. Although both courts approved Shalub Kevorkian's release on bail, the judges still saw the Palestinian professor's knowledge production as potentially inciting. As a result, she was summoned for a series of interrogations.